Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Marketing Profs March Friday Forum on AI. I'm Robin Doty, Program Manager here at Marketing Profs, and it is my pleasure to introduce our second session of the day. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. If you experience any audio or visual problems, please try to refresh the page or log out and log back in. If you're on Wi Fi or have multiple applications open, it could impact your viewing experience. So, when in doubt, close it out. And you can check out the right hand side panel for some fun engagement options. You can use the chat to connect with your fellow marketing friends. You can reply and send reactions to comments by hovering over them. You can use the Q&A tab to submit questions for our speaker, and you can also upvote your favorite questions, and we will be sure to take the most popular ones first. As soon as the presentation is done, we will get to as many as we can. There is a PDF of the deck available to download in the Resources tab, and if you look to the bottom of your screen, you will see the emoji button. Feel free to share your reactions. This session, Engage, Activate, Convert AI for Marketing Content, is from today's stellar sponsor, Allego. Allego is the only modern revenue enablement platform to lead across digital selling, content, learning, and coaching, powered by practical AI. Allego delivers the simplicity of an all-in-one platform without compromising depth, so teams can confidently know, show, and do what it takes to succeed. And we have Deniz Olcay ready to dive into this session. Deniz has a sales centric background, including sales training at Rain Group. In his previous role at Dun and Bradstreet, he was the VP of product marketing, managing a portfolio representing over 650 million in annual revenue. He is intimately familiar with the challenges of selling virtually. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Deniz. Please take it away.
Thank you for that introduction and welcome everybody. Good to see some familiar faces already in the chat. I'm really excited for this session today around how AI is really changing the landscape of content, and whether it's at the top of the funnel or at the bottom of the funnel, we have a jam-packed session here for you today. So I'm really, really excited. Quick on my background. I actually started my career in door-to-door selling. Believe it or not, I sold copiers door to door in rural Massachusetts during the recession. I would not recommend that to anybody, but it definitely got me more intimately familiar with the challenges sales teams go through each and every day. I moved into sales training and sales consulting, and most of my career was actually in product marketing. So for those of you that are in the product marketing function, shout out to all of you. But in today's session, we're going to be talking about how in the AI era, content either becomes your knowledge infrastructure or it just simply becomes invisible. I'm going to walk through 3 marketing content horror stories and how AI changes your survival strategy. We're really going to lean into the Friday the 13th theme. Want to have a little bit of fun. So if you know your favorite scary movie, drop that in the chat. My personal one is The Shining, which is a classic. But this quote is actually from another favorite movie of mine, The Sixth Sense. Sixth Sense. I think the quote goes something like, "I see dead content," or is it "dead people"? Can't quite remember. But content that never gets discovered, unfortunately, never gets used and never influences revenue. So I hope by the end of this session, we're going to share some practical tips for you to combat that challenge, no matter what your role is. If you're a marketing leader, if you're in content marketing, if you're in product marketing, you're going to find something of value in this session. So unfortunately, a lot of marketing content ends up not getting noticed. It's technically still there, but it's sort of like lost in the woods a little bit, and nobody can see it. So today, we're going to talk about how to keep your content from becoming the next victim. First, we're going to look at the problem. Marketing teams are creating more content than ever. Actually, AI is compounding this problem. It's sort of a double-edged sword, if you will. Makes it easy on one hand, but on the other hand, it's actually creating a problem where there's so much content that it's hard to kind of cut through the noise. And somehow it's still impossible for sellers, buyers, or AI to find the right thing when they need it. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some content frameworks, one that helps your content survive in the AI era instead of becoming another victim in the content graveyard, as I like to call it. And finally, I'll share some practical survival guides for you to take back to your team so your content stays alive, useful, and actually influences revenue. But before we do, we're going to have a little bit of fun, a short video clip from one of my favorite commercials.
Let's hide in the attic.
No, in the basement. Why can't we just get in the running car?
Are you crazy? Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
Bart.
If you're in a horror movie, you make poor decisions. That's what you do.
Shh, I'm being quiet. Breathing on me.
So for those of you that recognize that one, that's the Geico commercial. I love that one because, apparently in horror movies, people make terrible decisions. They run upstairs instead of going outside in the running car, or they hide behind the chainsaws. And, sometimes in marketing, I feel like we do the same thing with content, not intentionally. But I'm curious to kind of, hear a little bit from the audience before we jump in. I'm curious with a quick poll. Which content horror story feels the most familiar in your organization? Is it great content exists, but nobody online can find it? Is it that sellers can't find the content they need? Maybe your problem is more at the bottom of the funnel versus at the top of the funnel. Is it that content gets created but never gets used? This is a common one, especially for product and content marketing teams. Or is it that personalization feels generic and templated? Maybe you're trying to create some more personalized content for a particular segment of the market. Just curious to kind of hear from you all. If it's something else, drop it in the comments. But wanted to kind of start with sort of a quick pulse of the audience, and then I want to see what some of your favorite movies are too. I'll call some. Oh, The Exorcist, that's a good one. Friday the 13th, that's a good one. That's awesome. Active group today, so I appreciate you guys leaning in. Let's give you a couple of minutes to finish the poll, and we'll react to that and continue along with our presentation. All right, just another moment. All right, I'm seeing the results now. So it feels like the top answer with 36% is great content exists, but nobody online finds it. So that's good. That's going to be the one that we're actually going to start with. I'm going to walk almost from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel as we go through. More votes are coming in though. Maybe it changes. Let's see what we got here. Content gets created but never gets used. 33%. That's one of my favorite ones as a kind of career product marketer. Let's see what else we got. Those seem to be the top two. All right, great. Well, good news is you're going to find some good content in this session that's going to make that hopefully some of those pains go away. So I'll continue along with the presentation. Thank you everybody for chiming in there. So let's start with sort of the framework for our presentation today. Most content problems, in my experience, falls into three main categories, right? So first is content nobody can find. Second, content that exists but drags down your authority in the market. Third, content that never gets used in real buying conversations by sellers. And again, having some fun here and labeling them appropriate with our theme for Friday the 13th. The first one's invisible content, zombie content, and the content graveyard. So let's go through each one. So horror story number one is invisible content. Most marketing teams are, like we said, right, producing more content than ever. ChatGPT, LLMs has made this so much easier for us, right? Whether it's a blog or it's an enablement asset, maybe your sales teams are pinging you and you're using some of these tools to create, content for them. But it's actually getting harder for buyers and sellers to find your content, which we talked about, right? It's a little bit of a double-edged sword. And in the AI era, discoverability matters even more because AI systems look for very specific signals and sources, especially at the top of the funnel when generating an answer. And usually the issue comes down to three things, right? So first one is weak authority. This is when you haven't really clearly established your expertise around a particular topic. Second is poor structure. So your content isn't organized in a way that search engines or AI can easily extract answers. So think about your schema, your summaries, your tagging, your technical SEO, all these different things, as well as sort of how you think about topic clusters. And third one is fragmented topical ownership, right? So we end up with multiple pages competing with one another instead of building and reinforcing your authority in the market. And the result is that even great content becomes effectively invisible to traditional and also AI search. And one of the biggest shifts happening right now, right before our eyes, is where AI actually gets its answers. So let's dive into that for a little bit because it's very relevant to sort of how we solve this problem, right? This chart is a recently published article from SEMrush, actually just published in January, shows the domains most cited by AI answers like answer engines like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude. And each one is different, by the way, right? So, and notice how, LinkedIn is now one of the most referenced sources. This was completely different a couple of months ago, right? I think Reddit's kind of been in the running for a while, Wikipedia, YouTube, right? Especially, if we're in B2B, these are highly relevant channels for us. But most recently, LinkedIn kind of bumped up in the rankings as well. So, the takeaway is that AI visibility is really no longer just about your website. It's about authority across the web and how you can get your content into those channels to solve the visibility problem, right? And AI doesn't necessarily reward content volume. It rewards relevance and authority, right? And it's really tempting for us as marketing teams who are, strapped for resources, and there's a lot of pressure to sort of crank out content and really focus on volume, right? But how many times have you seen a random site being cited in an AI answer, right? It somewhat levels the playing field a little bit, at least from what we know now. And the most successful content really sits at the intersection of three things, in my opinion, right? So when you think about it, it's real user demand, what buyers are actually searching for and asking about, your SEO tools, and maybe even if you have a conversation intelligence capability can be a good source for this intelligence, what's happening on the front lines with your sales teams, and what really is in demand and getting volume in the market. Second is your business priority, right? Topics tied to your product, your expertise, your ideal customer profile. And third is authority content. So clear answers that demonstrate expertise, structure, clarity. And when content really sits in that middle area, in that intersection, it becomes the content that search engines and AI systems surface, right? So if content sits outside of this overlap, it may exist, but it probably won't be discovered, or it's lower chances of being discovered. So moving on to the second horror story, which is very much related to that first horror story, is what I call zombie content, which is basically pages that are technically on your site or in your content repositories, but weaken your entire site. When multiple pages compete for the same topic, search engines and AI struggles to determine authority, right? So I like to use an analogy here to demonstrate the point. So if you're a student that has written, let's say, 9 A+ papers, but you have 1 F, that's going to drag your grade down. And search engines and AI work the same way, and they're very harsh graders, right? So if they determine that one of your pages sort of wandering around like a zombie and doesn't have a purpose, isn't linked to a particular topical cluster, and it's actually competing with what you already say, you're going to get penalized for that. So instead of helping rankings, that's going to drag your results down and overall credibility. And I think this is one of the number one problems I see in a lot of marketing teams is they don't put the sort of effort in to identify those zombie pages and merge and deduplicate and really reinforce topical authority, right? It's very easy for us to create content, like I said, and get it out of the door. But, springtime's approaching, right? And none of us like to do spring cleaning. At least I'm not one of those people. But, there's so much value in doing a content audit and trying to identify those zombie pages that might be contradicting one another or saying the same thing. You're much better off consolidating those different shallow content pieces and building one deep piece of content that has sort of like spokes to other related content. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. So the old content model, I think, treated blogs like a news feed on your site. The new model really treats content like a digital library that's accessible across those key domains that we talked about, right? So every piece should really strengthen your topical authority and support those future AI answers. And one way to fix the zombie content and improve discoverability is by organizing content into these topic clusters, right? So think of the hub as your main authority page on a topic. It answers the big question, what the topic is, why it matters, how it works. And in this example, you'll see how we at Allego, right, worked back from sales content management as a key topic cluster, where we want to build our authority around. And the surrounding pages answer the specific questions buyers ask, or that are more like niche kind of questions around that topic. And each spoke links back to that main topical hub page, right? Reinforcing our authority. So this structured approach to content makes it easier for your search engines or AI systems. And we're going to talk a little bit about even sales content and how we can draw some parallels between how AI and GPT and Google grade your content and how sellers also perceive your content in a very similar way. So I even think about, when I was preparing for this webinar, pulling that SEMrush blog I landed on, it was updated in January, right? They didn't ship another page. They went back to their main topical page. There's so much change happening around AI and visibility, and they're keeping that page fresh, and it's reinforcing their topical authority around search visibility, right? So we can think about it in a very similar way. And the third horror story happens a little bit later in the funnel. I think my product marketers on the audience are going to be very familiar with this one, right? Marketing builds sales content, but sellers struggle to find the right asset at the right moment. The result is a massive content graveyard where valuable assets and brochures just never end up influencing a deal. And behind every successful content strategy is a strong taxonomy, both on your website and sort of your top of funnel content, but also for your bottom funnel and sales content as well. And taxonomy really determines how content is categorized, discovered, and recommended. And I love this quote by Peter Ostro. For those of you that are not familiar with him, he's a kind of lead thought leader at a research analyst firm Forrester. And he says, taxonomy determines what sellers see, how search and Gen AI behave, what gets recommended. When it's messy, outdated, or overly complicated, sellers lose trust very quickly. Similar to how Google and Gen AI might lose trust in your site and your content at the top of the funnel, right? So if you're got a sort of zombie content floating around, you got unstructured content at the bottom of the funnel, your sellers are going to lose trust in you in a very similar way, right? So to avoid the sales content graveyard, we use a very simple survival framework as 3 steps: create it, answer it, and personalize it. So create content informed from real buyer conversations and sales input. So you use sales to launch that content and build authority, right? So what better way to build authority with a sales team than to partner with a rep and introduce that content to them, right? So it gets adopted. You want to structure that knowledge so sellers in AI can retrieve answers instantly. Sellers don't want to dig through folders, right? We know that that model is broken. It's old. We're very much moving towards an era where AI is surfacing answers for reps, very similar to what we're doing when we interact with GPT in our personal lives and professional lives. Then activate it in the context of deals so sellers deliver the right content at the right time. So deal context makes sales content adoption and use skyrocket as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if your team is sort of deciding to reorganize or rebuild your sales content library, the best place to start is actually with a simple survey of your sales and customer teams, right? So you want to understand the real questions buyers are asking, what content actually gets used, where people struggle to find the right things. Once you understand those answers, the next step is structuring your content so sellers can actually access it instantly, right? So some questions might be, what buyer questions come up most often in your deals, right? Or what content do you use most often in customer conversations today? Where do you struggle to find the right content? What objections or concerns do buyers raise that we don't address well today? Or what moment in the sales cycle needs better content support, right? So with these 5 key questions, you can really get a good pulse on the sales organization and where you want to focus some of your content generation and how you might even want to organize your content so that sellers can find it really, really easily. So when we think about, content structure, once it is in a good structure, AI can actually begin answering real questions that sellers have. So instead of digging through folders or repositories, sellers are now simply wanting to ask a question, right? What are my 3 primary differentiators? Find me a case study on the financial services vertical, right? What is the price for product A, right? These are the things that sellers are wondering. And to arrive at those answers, the traditional way is they have to go to a search or some folders, right? But now we're very much moving towards AI, right? Answering those questions for reps linked directly to a sales content library. And the system synthesizes the answer from that structured content, and it dramatically speeds up how sellers find that content. And also, we've seen much less questions coming from sales teams with this approach too, right? So if you're a product marketer in the audience, when's the last time you got a ping from one of your sellers saying, where's that deck on XYZ, right? But now what we're able to do is really arm these sales teams with agents at the front lines, and it answers the question. And you'll see on the right-hand side, this is the Allego platform, but you'll see sort of a source and a quote, right? Saying like, this is where this answer came from. And the rep can quickly grab that and use it in their deal. So that's sort of like one shift that we're seeing in terms of sales content management. And in terms of measurement, and I think adoption and engagement with buyers, I think most marketing teams measure sales content, either with downloads or page views. But what really matters is understanding how content influences deals, right? I use content A. What was the outcome for the deal where it was used? And this is where digital sales rooms come in. They're basically, think of them like microsites or shared spaces where sellers and buyers interact around the content used in a deal. So marketers can create these landing pages and pre-populate them with content that we want our sellers to use in a deal. And because the content lives right there in that deal room or sales room, you can exactly see who engaged with it, what they viewed, and also what happened in the sales cycle, right? So if that deal ends up being closed won or closed lost, you can start to build some correlation analysis with how your content is actually impacting win rates and average sales price and a multitude of different metrics, which makes your content measurement much more strategic and tied to real revenue impact. And I think one question I get as we're sort of nearing the end of this presentation is like, where do I start, right? So I want to make this a little bit more practical and relevant to your role. So if you're a marketing leader today, on this call, the shift is from content volume to authority at the top of the funnel, right? Your strategy should really revolve around the questions buyers are actually asking. Where do I have authority? And prioritizing getting into the channels AI is pulling answers from. If you're a content marketer, I think your primary sort of priority is structuring the knowledge, right? Turning those zombie and scattered pages into organized topic clusters that AI and also sellers can navigate. And if you're a product marketer, the opportunity is really turning your content and messaging into answers, right? And putting content within the context of a deal. So think about your FAQs, your objections, your case studies, your product content that sellers use and reference them easily versus dig for them, right? And one hack you can do is, maybe you put all of your case studies in a custom GPT and, you say, hey, rep, if you want to find a case study, interact with the GPT first. And then if you can't find it, come to me, right? So you can use AI as sort of like your first line of defense in terms of responding to sales teams as well. And I think when these three roles obviously work together, content becomes much more structured and much more impactful. So if you're thinking about, how to structure content better, we're sharing a resource after the session. It walks through how to design a sales content taxonomy that works for both marketing and sales. I think it's a great starting point for building a more structured content foundation. So, be sure to download that after the webinar and check that out. And, I think that wraps up our session for today. If you want to learn more about Allego and check out resources, be sure to scan the QR code. That will take you actually to a digital room where we've hosted, the slides and many other resources for you as part of this session. And I'm hoping we can get to some of the questions.
Yes, thank you so much for such a great presentation, Dennis. I also loved the theme, and we do have quite a lot of questions, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. But of course, you all can still add questions to the Q&A and upvote the ones you want answered most. But we will start with Kelly and several other people who are asking, what do folks do when AI doesn't have the knowledge to create your content? My niche is so niche, AI can't generate accurate information.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it sort of, I think it should reassure all of us, first of all, that, it actually improves the value that subject matter experts have on an organization, right? So I always recommend starting with humans first, right? Interview your subject matter experts and actually build that content library and that knowledge base so that AI can make you more efficient, right? The AI is only going to be as good as its foundation of knowledge and data, right? So especially for you, if you've got a niche area where AI doesn't really know the answers or can't really generate the right output, you have to even pay more attention to your kind of structured taxonomy to make sure AI is kind of going to the right set of content to answer something or generate something. So I would say, start with your subject matter experts, document that content, get that out of their heads, right? And build that knowledge library. That's going to be key for you.
Absolutely. So David and some other people are asking, how can you tell if a page is competing with another page? And how do you track this across your website to ensure a new page isn't going to compete with an existing one? He's been having this question for a while and very happy to ask it to you.
Yeah, no, again, I think, for from an SEO standpoint, hopefully you've got an SEO tool that you're using. You can definitely see pages that are competing with one another with your focus keyword, right? That's one. And I would say, when you're looking at that sort of topical cluster, are you talking about the same thing at the same level of depth across two different pages? Like you have to really pay attention to that. Your central kind of topic should be sort of like the overview of what is it, why does it matter, right? And then the spokes are going to be your maybe industry specific variations, or maybe it's going to be like a persona specific variation, right? So I would definitely lean in on your SEO tools to find like low hanging fruit, right? I've got the same topical cluster, I've got the same keyword target for two different blogs. You gotta merge those, right? Or I'm talking about coaching, for instance. I mean, we had Allego talk about coaching. I've got 10 different pages talking about coaching. Okay, like that's an opportunity to merge those 10 pages and have one definitive guide or one definitive kind of anchor content, and then have like derivative content on it, right? So it could be a multitude of ways that you focus on that. But I would start with your SEO tools and just um, you know, look at some of the competing keywords they have. That's sort of the low hanging fruit.
Amazing. So we have this question from Haisa and several others who are asking for a deep history of a blog or a resource center, should you unpublish old or outdated posts? And if so, how do you reasonably manage the broken links and redirects? If this is understandably a huge volume of redirects that are to hurting your site.
Yeah, I mean that's such a nuanced question, right? I mean, I wish I had a kind of off the shelf answer for that. It's going to depend on traffic you're getting to each page. It's going to depend on sort of the content depth on each page. Obviously, you want to minimize the number of redirects and don't create redirect chains. So that's key. But I would say like the first thing to do is just start with a site map, right? I mean, hopefully all of you have mapped like every single page on your website. You've mapped like what your target focus keyword is for those sites, right? How much volume of traffic you're getting, what was the published date, and just look for low hanging fruit. And at some point, you're going to have to make some compromises, right? You might have two pages that are very similar, that are competing, that have good volume. But the question is, how can you merge those things and create something with more depth that's going to really go after that kind of target keyword and maybe rise you up in the ranks?
So I think we have time for just one more question. There are several more. So, of course, please do reach out to Dennis to get more answers. But this last one is from Roberta, who's asking, given the rise of authority content, is the good old fashioned FAQ a way to establish that authority and to answer questions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say FAQs are still, live and very well. I think especially for, at the top of the funnel, AI, as we know, really likes like short snippets and summaries, right? And quick hit answers because, I mean, think about it from their perspective, right? They're trying to minimize processing power, right? So if your page is easier to scan and it's easier to get to an answer and it has topical authority, you're going to be selected to get cited, right? At least that's what we're seeing today, right? Nobody really knows, and anyone trying to tell you that they know, they're probably trying to sell you a little bit of snake oil. So just be really careful. But in terms of like what I'm seeing in CMO communities and what I'm hearing, keeping your content short, sweet, with snippets is a good way to solve that problem. And it works the same way for sales teams too, by the way, right? So when sales teams are looking for those answers, make it easy for them as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. I had a lot of fun with it. I loved this theme. I loved hearing everything that you were saying. And I think our audience did as well. So thank you so much, Dennis. And thank you, of course, Allego for sponsoring us for today. There should be a survey popping up on your screen. We do really love your feedback. Please do click the link either there or in the chat. I personally read everything. So I love to hear what you think, what you need, and what you want in the future. So please do, of course, add your thoughts. We do have one more final presentation with Mark Hinkle beginning today at 1:15 Eastern. So you won't want to miss that. And we will see you back here in a few minutes.
Thank you, everyone.